Hi, it's Griggs of Obsidian Wisdom. Today we answer the question, how do we resolve conflicts within the family? If you had to guess what the most overlooked aspect of creating generational wealth is, what would you guess it to be? So most people would say, oh, it's not having enough money. I'll say most people are thinking about the money when it comes to creating generational wealth. Now, whether they have the right strategy, I'll say, all right, we can have a different conversation. If not money, what I often hear is people will say, oh, it's the wealth transfer. You don't have the right estate plan in place where maybe you're overlooking taxes, or maybe you haven't put the right will or trust together to make sure that your family is able to get the money in the most efficient way possible. And I'll say that, yeah, that's often overlooked too, but it's not quite the number one, the most often overlooked aspect of generational wealth. When it comes to the most overlooked part of generational wealth, it is conflict resolution. What do we do when people in our family don't like each other? What do we do when people in our family are fighting or they disagree on how to spend the money? What do we do? Do we have a plan in place to ensure that our family stays together? As we get ready to celebrate Thanksgiving, family is the thing I'm most thankful for. I appreciate my parents, my brother, my sister, my kids, my wife, my family through marriage. I appreciate my family the most. And that's probably one of the reasons why Thanksgiving has slowly been becoming my most favorite holiday because I'm so thankful for my family and I really do appreciate the time I get to spend with them. And because we may get along with each other right now, that doesn't mean that we're always going to get along. It doesn't mean that our kids will get along. It doesn't mean that our kids' will get along. And when you really start working your way down, one of the things that can ruin a generation, well, hands down, is splitting up your wealth. And that's what happens when you don't have a conflict resolution plan in place. Your family starts arguing, and the first thing that they're going to say is, okay, give me my money, I'm out. Now, let's say you had $1 million with two kids. Well, each of them has 500,000, so you don't feel quite as bad. But what if it's the next generation where now there's 10 mouths to feed, and then there's the same argument and we split it up, and now it's split up with $100,000 with each person? You and I probably say $100,000 isn't going to do much, right? You're not going to quit your job. You may be able to pay some bills off, but $100,000 isn't going to change much. And when you really think about the ability to create generational wealth, that is going to be one of the most common ways that you will lose your wealth is the family starts arguing, and then because you have no way to resolve that, they go their own ways. Today, I'll give you 5 strategies that you can implement in your family stewardship plan to ensure that your family stays together and your wealth is multiplying, not being divided. Step number one is you need to address family conflict proactively. I'm going to pull many of my conflict resolution strategies from the Bible. As you guys know, I have a master's in biblical studies. So I've read a lot and I often read scripture from the perspective of conflict resolution. How do we make our lives here on earth that much better? I know some people will focus on heaven and the afterlife, and I can appreciate that. But I also believe that there's so much wisdom in scripture that you could change your life today. So when it comes to addressing conflict in your family, I'm actually going to pull this verse from Matthew 18:15 through 17. It says, if a brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. See, that's the first step. If your family has a conflict and they need to resolve it, it should be the two people that are arguing should talk to each other first. And it should be the person who is slighted should talk to the other person. Because oftentimes you'll be surprised that the other person has no idea that what they said offended you. Should they have known? Maybe. Could they have known? Possibly. But they were unaware that it was bothering you to the point that you felt it the next day or a week later or a month later. So the best thing that you could do is discuss it with them in that moment. Maybe you take a minute to yourself, just calm yourself down, but you shouldn't go and talk to 5 other family members and kind of get everybody against that one family member because then when you talk to them, that's going to create more conflict because the person's naturally going to say what we would all say. Well, if it was bothering you, why didn't you mention it to me? And I think that that's a fair question. I often tell you guys from a corporate perspective that you should do the same thing, that when you don't like your job or you don't like the leadership or there's something that's going on, many times what we'll do is we'll just update our resume. We'll go and apply to new positions. We may quiet quit. We're not really working very hard at work. We got one foot in, one foot out. Everybody there is wondering what's going on, whether we're going to be there for the long term. And then when you put your 2 weeks notice in, leadership is often like, well, dang, what's going on? And you explain everything that's been bothering you. And you'll be surprised how often they had no idea that you were dealing or feeling this way. And I often feel it's in your best interest to let the person know when you're bothered because then they have the opportunity to fix it. And if they don't fix it, well, now you have the clarity that you need. You know that nothing was going to get better. The thing about not sharing your concerns with your leadership or your sibling is you don't actually know if they're really a jerk or if they have a slightly low emotional intelligence. And you'll be surprised at how low many people's emotional IQ really is. And then when you keep reading, it says, if he listens to you, you have gained your brother, right? So if they listen to you, you've already got the conflict resolved. Life is great. You can go back to being a family. But it says, but if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of two or three witnesses. So after you talk to them the first time, there's two outcomes. One is it's constructive and we can move on. The other is it was destructive. If it's destructive, we don't pretend like it was resolved because it wasn't. Everything that they're doing, we're now looking at it through that prism. Imagine or think of it in the sense of like two people in a relationship and one person cheats on the other spouse, but they never talk about it. Well, now every time the person doesn't go home, you think the person's out cheating and you're getting upset and you're going through their phone because you haven't resolved the actual conflict. If you want to move on in the relationship, you have to address the issue head on. And so if you talk to the person and it was destructive and not constructive, you would then need to bring two or three more people. Now, this could be any two or three family members that you just want to share the situation with, and then they can try to be the mediator. So we're not going all the way up to court with a judge. We're now at level two, which would be a mediator. And we do that in our normal circumstances as well, where if something doesn't work when they both talk, maybe we need a mediator, this third party, unbiased person, or at least someone that we both mutually respect. They're going to listen to what's going on and then they will make a suggestion. And if we listen to that person, again, the issue is solved and we have resolved everything and we can go back to being a family and operating the family business. Now, if the mediator doesn't work, we brought the two or three additional people and for some reason that didn't work. Scripture then says, if he refuses to listen to them, so right, you just had the meeting with the mediator and for whatever reason that didn't work, you had the two or three respective family members, that didn't work. It says, then you tell it to the church. So then you tell it to the entire family. The next time the family gets together to discuss the family business, you will then bring it to the entire family. Hey, look, this is what's going on between me and my sibling. This is what we call being proactive. This is why a lot of issues don't get resolved because a lot of people just let it go on step one and they don't work their way up. So now you bring it to the entire family and it says, and if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector, which is just basically saying, look, if the person in the family isn't willing to listen to the entire family at the family meeting where we all got together, then that person will be stripped of their position. They'll be stripped of their title. You can still love that person. You can still respect that person. But at the end of the day, the family business is the family business. And you already talked to them one-on-one. You already talked to them with two or three respected people that we agreed on. So that was our mediation. And then we brought it to the entire family to discuss. And more than likely, that would have been the family meeting that we would have had once a month or once a quarter. And in that situation, it would have been under the umbrella of the family leadership. So think of that as like your Supreme Court. Whenever there's arguments and issues that are going on in the family, everybody kind of meets. And then we have the case presented to the Supreme Court or the Family Leadership Council. And whatever that senior leadership of the family says is pretty much what we're going to do. If that person under the pressure of the entire family is still like, nah, I ain't doing it, right? Like I'm right and y'all are wrong, then there's nothing that you can do, right? I tell my kids that all the time. They argue about things all the time. And I'll tell them, look, when somebody says certain things, it's so crazy. It's so unreasonable. It's so outlandish that it's not even worth your time to correct them. Like I looked up and I said, the sky is blue. And then this person looked up and said, the sky is red. Well, like, what are we going to talk about? Why would I get in an argument with someone who just said the sky is red? And as much as we love our family, if the goal is to keep the family together, to honestly create generational wealth, and you find someone in the family is not quite wise enough to be in a decision-making capacity, then that person obviously could be in the family, whatever the budget may be, where that person's allowed to spend from the trust or however you designed it, they can still spend their portion of the money. They can't present opportunities to be able to invest the family's funds. That person is simply someone who's a beneficiary of it, but they no longer have their leadership role in that leadership capacity. Number two is you want to establish a decision-making framework. So high level, there's really three choices that you have. Number one is persuasion. Number two is bargaining. And number three is leverage. So if you have persuasion, then that means you probably bring data and statistics to help someone believe in what you're talking about. Hey, this is a great opportunity for our family. Here's all the information. Here's what the experts are saying. And then you persuade that person to agree with you. Number two is bargaining. Okay, you don't really like my idea, but can we meet in the middle? Maybe I was asking for $100,000 and you guys are okay with me starting with $20,000 of the family's funds and then I'll add $20,000 of my money. Or maybe you guys can do $20,000 and we can come back in 3 months. And if it's working, you can give me the other $80,000. This is what bargaining looks like. And when you're discussing things with your family, you do want to make sure everyone's voice is being heard while acknowledging and recognizing that everybody may not always get what they want. So bargaining is going to be the second option, which we often will have to do when it comes to the voices inside the family. Now, granted, if you're the first generation of your family stewardship plan, well, naturally, that's not as many voices. So you may actually be able to persuade and get enough people to agree with your plan. But by the time you're on your second or third generation, where you're talking about kids and grandkids and great grandkids, well, now it may be more of a bargaining situation where you may not get everybody to agree and buy into your plan, but you could put something together that the majority of them say, even if it doesn't work, we have now managed the risk in a way that the family's still going to be okay. And at least we have the opportunity to take advantage of this positive side if for some reason we're wrong and that person is right in what they're presenting. And then the third option is leverage. And leverage is a very fancy way of saying that we may call in a favor with a family member. We may remind them of some time that we helped them. We may blackmail them and be like, look, we're not going to do this for you next time if you don't do this for me. And while it doesn't sound very fun to say it out loud, like discussing with family, if you think about it from a political perspective, that's par for the course. That's what we do in politics all the time. The Speaker of the House goes around and they whip up the votes. What does that mean when they whip up the votes? That means they go and twist someone's arm and say, you better vote yes for this, or something negative is going to happen if you do not vote for my proposal. Now, obviously, using leverage is not what we want to start with, and oftentimes it could possibly damage the relationship a little bit. And so you do want to have a certain culture inside of your family that keeps them together as well. But sometimes if you've gone through the persuasion, if you've gone through the bargaining, and they're just determined to say no to you, then sure, leverage may be the option. So leverage can be done in a couple ways. One is you can go above that person. And let's say you go talk to that family leadership council, which is the equivalent of the Supreme Court of your family, and you get 2 to 3 of them to say, okay. And well, now it doesn't matter as much what the other person is saying. Now, if you are able to get 1 or 2 of those people to say yes, maybe they can apply their leverage to someone lower to get them to say yes. But leverage just works that way, where you have smaller discussions, you see what the person doesn't like, and you may see if it's something that you can add or adjust in your plan. Now, when it comes to implementing those 3 high level approaches on a more practical basis, like I said, in our family, I'll share a link to the video where I go through that overall process. But the W is a winnings philosophy, the I is identifying the patterns, the S is structuring the finances, the D is designing your dream life, which is your dream outcome, the O is optimizing the systems, and the M is modeling the successful. If something wants to be approved in our family, it needs to go through those 6 criterias. It should check off every single box because that's how we know that our generational wealth won't be wasted on cryptocurrency or some fly by night opportunity that isn't really focused on long term success as much as it is on gambling in the short term. But we just really feel like we know that this dice is going to land on 6s or 7s or snake eyes, or we know that when you roll the roulette wheel, it's going to be red. And so we're going to put our own money on red. But that's not how you maintain generational wealth. So you need to have a certain plan in place that your family requires in every single decision that is made and checked off. Step number 3 is you want to encourage constructive communication. So for this one, I'm going to actually go back to scripture. So James 1:19 says, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. And then Proverbs 15:1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And then Romans 12:17-21 says, repay no one for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So if you want to encourage constructive criticism, you want to make sure that people are listening, they're absorbing the information, that they're being slow to speak. You have heard people say, I have 1 mouth and 2 ears, so I should do twice as much listening as I do talking. When it comes to your family and your overall family stewardship plan, people have to be comfortable sharing their beliefs and they need to feel that they're being heard. And the best way to do that is by listening, and it is by responding softly. Because as scripture says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. Where it's how we say things is more important than what we say. It's how our body is responding, what nonverbal communications we're giving as we're listening to someone. Are we leaning forward? Are we nodding? Are we focused on listening to what is being said? Or are we playing on our phone and kind of looking away and just kind of falling asleep and yawning, where we're letting them know, like, this is boring. Are you done yet? And I added that Romans 12:17-21, because if I could just sum up the best way to communicate, really, that's really it. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. There are times that you genuinely feel like this person has it coming to them. But if you want to keep the family together, you have to overcome evil with good. And I tell my kids this all the time, and I acknowledge first and foremost, it's very easy to say this when it's someone else dealing with their situation than it is for me to do it in my own life with my own communication. But you and I both know that there are people who just want to bring out the ugly in us, where it makes them feel good when we go down in the mud with them. Like a pig just wants to roll in mud and they want everybody to be dirty with them. And oftentimes when you're trying to come from the right position, the person who knows that they're in the wrong, by getting you to do what they're doing, they're able to say, see, you're not much different than me. You pretend like you're all about the family and that you're understanding and you're patient, but you get mad, you yell, you curse, you say nasty things. You're just like me. Now, you and I may disagree with that when we talk about our entire interactions with the family. It may be true enough in that moment where it takes away your ability to effectively communicate. Scriptures, when it talks about judging others, which, spoiler alert, you are supposed to do. I know some people say, like, nobody can judge me. That's not what it says. It tells you exactly how to judge someone. And it says you judge people by first taking the plank out of your own eye so that you have the credibility to then take the speck out of their eye. You can't tell your kids don't smoke while you're smoking. Sure, it's true, smoking is bad for you, but how effective is that message? You can't tell your kids that they're wasting away their time watching TV and then you watch a bunch of TV too. You can't tell your kids that they can be anything that they want while they watch you settle for a life of mediocrity. When it comes to effective communication, you have to walk the walk before you talk the talk. And by taking the plank out of your own eye, by setting yourself up, being like, all right, I'm going to fix some of these things in my life. Then when you talk to other people, they say, okay, well, I noticed that Dre have been working on this. So I know that he's just sharing some of the things that he learned because as he reads, as he tries new things, he's excited to share that information with me. And that just changes the way that your family receives the information. And it also ensures that you have that generational wealth inside of the family stewardship plan that you put together. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to take a moment to thank you for watching this video. If you find value in this, I just ask you to like and subscribe because I love giving you valuable insights on how to solve generational wealth through strategic retirement planning. Step number 4 is you want to seek professional mediation when necessary. You need to think about your family as a business. And when you have a business, are you going to do everything in your business? Sure, maybe at the very beginning, but you and I both know for your business to grow, you have to spread some of that. You have to create a C-suite of executives. You need to have the chief executive officer. You need to have the chief financial officer. You may have to have the chief compliance officer, the investment officer. There are so many parts of a successful business that you need to have someone who specializes in each of these. Oftentimes, depending on what your family is arguing about, it makes sense to have some sort of professional that you can reach out to. If someone has a business idea and you have a CPA or financial planner in your team, give them the business proposal and they can vet it out. They can let you know the pros and the cons. They can do the market research and the benchmarks to let you know the probability of success. That way, we're not just arguing back with emotions and feelings, but we actually have some concrete information. The same can be true if the family is looking to buy real estate, or really if the family is interested in investing in something that wasn't their expertise, right? If you built your family wealth off of a business, then that's your wheelhouse. And if you're looking to invest in real estate, then you should probably talk to a real estate professional. If your family built their wealth off of real estate, but you're looking to buy companies and acquire them, well, maybe you should talk to someone who specializes in reading the financials of a business to know whether or not it's a good investment and a good price for you. What it really comes down to is all of us have a particular wisdom or insight into understanding the way we interact with the world. There are things that we all were able to build our wealth off of. There are things that we all specialize in. Whenever we're outside of our wheelhouse, outside of our string, we should have a team of professionals that we have vetted, that we are comfortable with, that we all agreed on, that we should speak with whenever we have problems. This could really be anything that the family will be better served by having outside professional help, almost like a business acquiring a consultant. Maybe it just needs something for 2, 3 months, even a year. But when the project is over, the project is over. Maybe you talk to someone and they share the insights with you so that you can then run the project. So I'm someone that's big on I do, we do, then you do. So that was a teaching strategy that I always felt was very effective when I was teaching in schools. And I find it to be very effective when it comes to transferring wisdom and leadership practices to the next generation. So I'm going to do it the first time around and you just watch me. You just kind of hang out. If you have any questions, write them down. I'll answer them for you, but just kind of watch what the process is. And then we do. So that one takes a little bit longer. And that's the one that really takes a lot of my patience, but you have to do it together. And so I may do step 1 and you may do step 2 today. And then you may do step 1 tomorrow and I do step 2 tomorrow. And then we'll just switch around the pieces and then we'll see how you're doing. I'll give you feedback as we're going through it. And then we go on to step 3, and that is you do. So I do, we do, you do. So while these are effective strategies you can implement when you have the information, what do you do when no one has it to start with? And that's often why it would make sense to reach out to a professional. Pay them the first time for them to do it completely. And then the second time you pay them where you do it together. So that's the we do. And then from there, the third time you do it and you pay them just to kind of give you a second opinion or review what you did. And then now you have taken their wisdom and you have implemented it inside of a sustainable process inside of the family business. Now, for some of you, it would just make more sense to just pay the person to be permanently on your staff. And there's tons of family offices, which is just a family business, that do that. They have a C-suite of executives that run their business as maybe 5 or 6 people, and they run their entire wealth infrastructure. They help make the decisions and implement the strategies. Now, sometimes they could be people in the family, family friends, people you're related to, but oftentimes I find it's more beneficial to have professionals outside of the family that you have built relationships with over time. And as you build trust, you've given them more and more responsibilities. You can also hire people because, again, it is your family business. There's a variety of ways, and it really depends what makes the most sense for your family as you're trying to maintain your generational wealth. And number five is you need to implement effective conflict resolution strategies. The number one thing you can do to ruin your generational wealth is by having an inconsistent application of the processes. If we say anytime someone has an argument, those two people have to talk, and that has to be step one, then it has to be step one. It cannot be, well, this is a big deal, so we're just going to bring it up to the whole family, because that person's going to look and be like, well, wait a minute. I thought the rules inside of the family said we're going to follow these steps, and they would be right. And so it's very important that you're not hypocritical in the implementation of strategy. We don't want to be prejudiced against a family member, and we don't want to show favoritism to a family member. We want to be even keel. We want to make sure that we're implementing it exactly as we designed it, because then it has the consistency and the accountability necessary for everyone to know what's going to happen. As soon as something happens, even your youngest kid should be able to say, I know exactly how we resolve this. If someone brings a business plan to the family or something that they believe we should all invest in, everybody should be able to look at that. And your youngest family member should be able to say, well, this isn't going to be approved because they didn't model the successful. They don't show this actually working yet. We don't want to be the first into something. That's not how you maintain generational wealth. That's gambling. We're not out to gamble. We're out to find great opportunities, but they need to be proven opportunities. It's okay for us not to invest in the first round where we have the ability to gain 50%, but we have the ability to lose 50% as well. It's okay to invest in the second or third round in that opportunity where maybe we got 10 to 15% returns, but it was much more likely to succeed, where we had an 80% probability of success versus jumping in early, we maybe only had a 25% probability of success. One of the beautiful things about effectively implementing these conflict resolution strategies is everyone is already held accountable to the standard that we all agreed upon. Because we all have this same starting point, because we all have this agreed upon standard, whatever it says is going to be the way that we act. And because you have this agreed upon starting point, it's not going to be the feelings of the day where I'm happy with you, I'm mad at you, or I feel bad implementing this. It's like, this is what we agreed upon as a family. This is our family compass. This is how we make decisions. And because this is how we make decisions, we cannot alter this without it being literally like a constitutional amendment where 80% of the family of voting powers gets to say, I think this will be a good change for the family. But if you can't do that, then we have to maintain exactly what we've already done. Because you and I both know that the biggest reason that generational wealth does not last is because the people who built the generational wealth, the transformation that they went through, Jim Rohn talks about it, Brian Tracy talks about it, I talk about it, that becoming a millionaire isn't the most important thing, right? That's just money. There's only so much that you can buy, so many clothes you can wear, so many cars you can have in your garage. It's who you had to become a millionaire. That's what the most important thing is. And because your future generations have not had to go through any sort of a transformation, you have to have processes in place, not only to maintain your wealth, which is what most people do, like, hey, look, let's have a trust or a will, yada, yada, yada. But you also have to have the wisdom in place to bring up the family members so that they are operating as if they built $1 million from scratch so that they can maintain it when you give it to them. Otherwise, it's going to be like the 70% of people who win the lottery and the money's gone in 3 years or filing for bankruptcy. The close to 80% of professional athletes who also had to file for bankruptcy because they did not become the wealthy person that they needed to be. When you look at the numbers of poverty and wealth, there is a certain amount of insight that we have. That's what wisdom is. Wisdom is skill or insight when it's translated in the Bible. When there's a certain amount of insights that you have where I can teach you, this is how we built our wealth. This is how we make decisions. This is how we keep our wealth and grow our wealth. Then they have the insights now to maintain the wealth. If all they grew up with was spending money, then that's all they know how to do. And as the circumstances change and the situations change, all they know how to do is spend money. So when it's time to make money, they don't really know what to do. Nobody taught them how to make money. And so when you put these 5 conflict resolution strategies in place, it's not only about making sure the family stays together and that we don't split the money a bunch of ways, it's also to make sure that we're building that foundation of uplifting the next generation, because we're so disciplined and consistent in our process that everyone knows exactly what the answer is before they even ask.